the Noah situation has reared its head again, and it looks like the Knicks are going to be parting ways with Joakim Noah before training camp starts, whether by trade or whether by stretch. I mean, what do you guys think about this, man? What do you got? What's your take, Macri? Give me your take on the whole Noah situation and how we got here to begin with.
Man, talking about Joakim Noah is like talking about your drunk uncle who's been to rehab 3 or 4 times. It's like you get the gist already. It's not getting any better. He can keep going back if he wants. It's just at this point, it's waiting for how he's going to get off the roster. I don't think anybody out there is under the assumption that anything could happen that would leave him still on the Knicks team in what is media day? 8 days from today? 9 days? Yeah, I don't think there's any scenario where that's possible. I mean, if at the last second before they're ready to do a wave and stretch, somebody comes in and there's a palatable trade on the table, we were talking about a little bit before we went on air. Who knows? But I have to think any team is going to just demand a price a little bit too high, more than they want to pay, and that's even considering they'll probably want to send back a bad contract of their own. So I think he's gone. To me, I think the delay has probably been about negotiating over what the final number is going to be over what he gives back. Yeah. Which leads me to believe that he's out there trying to negotiate a deal for himself, or his agents are trying to do that with another team. So there's probably a couple balls in the air, which is why it's taken a while. But, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, or at the latest on Friday, this is going to get done.
Inevitable. So speaking of the giving of the money back, JB of the Knicks Film School had created a graphic running through a couple scenarios of, how the salary cap would look based on if Noah gives money back or if he doesn't. JB, you want to kind of break down that graphic for us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you though, it's a lot more fun doing my videos than doing these cap graphics. I'll be happy when we're past some of this stuff. But, and it's funny because, as fans, we have to care about the mechanics of all this because obviously it impacts which players that, we can add to the roster when you think about going forward. But I think the key point in this graphic is to say, I think people are worried that if the Knicks were to waive and stretch Noah, that cap hit that carries those 3 years will prevent the team from signing, players going forward. So what I did in the graphic was to show that while, the cap hit does get stretched, it also does open up 2019 space, which is obviously, important timing wise to get that space, but it also saves them a little over $1 million in terms of that stretch hit. Because we saw with Luol Deng, he gave back, I think it was $7.5 million. So if you do the same thing with Noah, you can see in that graphic, how the money works. And the way it goes is since he has 2 years left on his deal, they split the amount he gives back in proportion to the amount that he's owed over the 2 years. So that's why you get into all this percentage, percentiles of the 49% comes off this year and then the 51% would come off over the stretched years. But the point is, if he just gives back an amount that he can maybe close to make up, not all of it, but at least a portion of it by signing even a vet min deal. He's been in the league 10 years. So a vet min deal is 2.5 or about 2.4 million. So let's say he thinks he can do that over the next 2 seasons. And he thinks that he can go and kind of rejuvenate a late portion of himself somewhere else. He might be willing to give up that money to do that. And then, like I said, for the Knicks, it gives them a little more wiggle room.
True indeed. Jay Ellis, my question to you, man, is, I guess, how do we get to this point where it's kind of like the point of no return, right? Like we can't even get a couple minutes out of him this season. I mean, this is, a mutual split between both sides, wanting out beyond the repair. I mean, how do you think that we got here? Who's to blame here for this impasse?
I mean, of course, Phil Jackson was a little overzealous in signing Joakim Noah. You heard the story about how, he knew he was healthy because he put his arm out and he did chin-ups on Phil Jackson's arm, and now his shoulder is magically repaired and all the injuries have gone away for the rest of his career. It was It was bull. I mean, it's all Phil Jackson. It's cool to have Noah here, but he shouldn't have given him a long-term contract. And now we're paying for it right now. But to be honest with you, even if we're looking at the entire scope of the team and that center position, I almost feel like it's right now it might be a mistake to kind of go this route and try to stretch him, because we need a post defender. Mitchell Robinson isn't a post defender. And we have a guy who can possibly give us that. Maybe we can give him some minutes, raise his value, and then end up trading him later during the trade deadline. That's what I was hoping.
That's what I was thinking that the direction would be. But like I said, I mean, it seems as though, and maybe it's coming from his camp, it just seems as though, you know, this is it.
Well, the other thing, though, is, like, what are you guys willing to get? Like, what do you think is the least valuable? This is the way I've looked at it. Take the least valuable asset on the roster, including future picks. Whatever you think that is it really worth giving that up? Like, I don't think you could trade like a second round pick, right? So are you trading, like, you know, you're not trading Mitchell Robinson. Like, you're not, like, that's the problem I have. It's like, I don't think there's any player, even if it's a protected pick in the future, like, if the Knicks are good in 2020, I'd rather have like the 23rd pick to add to the roster, especially if they're capped out, than that $5 million of Noah's cap. You know what I mean?
And even putting that aside, you know, if this were, you know, basketball isn't black and white. This is not a black and white situation. David Fizdale's coming in, and he is tasked with, I think, arguably the toughest thing to do in sports. Be someone that is going to come into a new room full of new players that you've never coached before, that you've never worked with, and try to command the respect of that entire room full of guys from day one. And everything that you want to do as David Fizdale from this day forward will hinge, at least in part, on the tone that you set from day one. So if you can try to make your life as easy as possible from that, you know, from Jump Street, you want to try to do that. And if you are convinced as an organization and as a coach that Noah's going to come in and make your job that much more difficult, you know, I get people arguing the logic of waiting, the dollars and cents, and how they don't need the money yet. And I get all that. It's completely valid. And if those are the only considerations, fine. They're not the only considerations. This is real life. These are real people. They're trying to build something. You know, we're going to touch on it later. Kyrie Irving, you know, if he wants to come here, he's going to want to come to a certain type of situation. Well, guess what? That situation, it doesn't just magically appear next summer. It's something that has to start in September. And if you have a guy who's disgruntled, doesn't want to be there, and is going to make it a point to, you know, be that guy, for lack of a better term, it's not fair to Fizdale. It's not fair to what they're trying to build. It's not fair to themselves to try to attract free agents down the line. It just, you know, I get why they're doing it. It's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I just hope that this is just the last of the quote-unquote typical Knick move. I hope they really get past this one. I feel like it was Mills that gave him that deal based on Ron Baker and Timmy's deals. It was just bad from the jump. You know, I think the possibilities of it working out were remote, but obviously as fans we were optimistic that he could contribute at least a little something.
It was the worst free agent signing in Knicks history as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, Alan Hahn points it to worse than Jerome James, man.
Worse than Jerome James.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing, though, that there is the context of that 2016 summer was a unique summer, right? Like, literally, it was a cap party. Everyone was getting drunk at the same time. There were a lot of bad deals. So, like, you know, I get it because of the, you know, the narrative with the Knicks and certain contracts, and not to say this one wasn't a bad contract, but, you know, I think there is that context to it was,
Yeah, Biyombo too. Everybody was getting money that year.
Oh, Bismack. Love me some
Bismack. Biyombo, man.
Everybody was getting money.
Everybody was
a championship team at the time because Melo was here. But man, that you could have at least 2 years.
It was a deal that was screaming for some kind of injury protection to trigger a third or a fourth guaranteed year, and the fact that it was 4 years fully guaranteed showed the fact that the guy who gave the deal was basically still learning on the job. You know, I guess it was 14, 15 months after he had gotten it.
Yeah.
And I don't think he had quite fully gotten it yet by that point.
It's funny because his whole spiel coming into New York was not to get bad contracts. He was getting rid of all the bad contracts. It was going to be all good contracts, short term. We need to conserve cap space, and then he folded. He folded hard that year. But I'm tired of talking about Phil Jackson. My God, I'm getting angry again.
Oh man, well, I mean, time will tell how this Noah situation plays out, man. But you know, like I said, I just hope we just get it over with. You know, I didn't want to give up the cap space, but it is what it is. But segueing into that, you know, Jay Ellis had alluded to, you know, when we go into this training camp roster and we look at the big men that we're coming in with at the center position, you know, we have a bit of a drought here because, you know, we have Enes Kanter starting. Obviously, you know, he's locked in as a starter. The good thing is, obviously, it seems like a guy like Mitchell Robinson is going to get a lot of burn early.
Nice.
And then, you know, you could say Cornette maybe at the 5, he's more of a stretch 4, but, you know, what do you guys think about that? I know a lot of people were, you know, even though Mitchell Robinson had a fairly decent summer league, some people thought that he may get some more time in the G League, or maybe he wasn't completely ready for the big show. JB, what do you think about that, throwing Mitchell Robinson into the fire?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all realize that, you know, he didn't play college last season. He's still young. He's still going to need some time to develop and some patience. I think the debate of, you know, play him in G League or not, I think people are taking it like it's either he plays in G League or he plays in NBA. It's like kind of one or the other. Or like even I've seen, you know, conversations people have of like, oh, if you're saying he needs time in the G League, you don't believe he's going to be a star. I don't think it has to be that way. I think it's kind of a nuanced answer where you will see, like we saw last year, perhaps, of he's playing on the team, he's with the team most of the year, but there might be some gaps in the schedule where you can get some G League work in, have him play a game here or there. It just kind of depends how he's going to react to that everyday grind, 82 games. Like that's a huge jump that he's got to make. And I think they gotta be honest, you know, with themselves and evaluating that through the year and let that tell them more than, you know, deciding right now, you know, this is how we're going to treat him. You just got to see, I think, how he's going to react.
So let me ask you real quick on that G League topic. Even though we have Trier and Hicks on the two-way deals, how does that work in terms of the flexibility in terms of, you know, being able to send guys like a Robinson down and back up? You know?
Yeah, I mean, they can do that as long as they have the roster room, you know, on Westchester, which they can easily be, you know, make room for something like that. The two-way is more to prevent those players from playing more than 45 days on the big, I call it big league club because I'm used to it the minor leagues, but you know, that same idea on the NBA team. But in terms of going the other way, I should probably double check that, but I don't think there's restrictions as long as
I don't think there is.
It's those G League rules, right? Like you got to be 1 to 3 years in the league.
Yeah.
And the player might have to agree if it's longer than that, but I think that's all it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Jay Ellis, give me your take on the center position and you know, Mitchell Robinson in particular.
I'm a Mitchell Robinson fan, man. I love what he did in the summer league. He does have a lot to show and a lot to grow, but instinctively, I love his motor. You know, motor is something I feel like isn't really teachable in the NBA. You kind of either have it or you don't. And that he has in spades. And I also love his athleticism. And I also love that he, even with his limited experience, he still found a way to make an impact in the summer league. Now, granted, there's still some things he has to kind of adjust to. I was reading something from, I don't know what I was reading. I think it was from the Atlantic or something. It was pointing out a lot of his shortcomings. Some of it was his footwork. Some of it was like he's not too low to the ground and he gets beat off the dribble. But his athleticism allowed him to kind of recover a lot. So I love the potential, man. Once he gets set in the NBA, once he gets that coaching from the Knicks staff, I think he's going to be fine long term. He just has to put in the work, to be honest with you. And I feel like we don't have that many options at the center position anyway, so I don't really see him not being on the squad.
Yeah, we really don't. I mean, unless you know, they find a big in a Courtney Lee swap or pick up a big off of waivers, and you know, once they get Courtney Lee out of here, if they do, but we'll see. Macri, what's your take on Mitchell Robinson and getting him in this early?
You know, I think it's an interesting dichotomy for them this year, because on one hand, you got a guy in Kanter who, you know, I think it's pretty clear at this point that he is not in their long-term plans. Obviously, they want to do right by him. They want to showcase him. You know, they're not going to bend over backwards to give him extended minutes, but they're also not going to, you know, even if Mitchell Robinson came out and was a stud, it's not like they're going to glue Kanter to the bench. They wouldn't do that to him. I don't think it doesn't look good. So Kanter's going to play. And you know what? He should. And I've been as big a Kanter critic as probably anyone. I'm not a fan of his. I think he's one of the worst defenders in the league. Oh, yeah. I think even though, you know, his like effective field goal percentage is really high, I think he's a guy that I mean, yes, he gets some garbage points on offensive rebound putbacks, but for the most part, when you get points from him, you're kind of shutting down your offense and dumping it in and letting him go to work. Yeah. All that being said, you know, I want to see what Robinson could do as much as anyone. But if you inject a guy that can't do the basics into your lineups, that makes life more difficult for everybody around him. And, you know, it's one thing to obviously, you know, learn some things on the fly. But if your guards can't rely on you, for instance, to set a proper screen, if you know, you're a turnstile in the post because you haven't learned the basics of post positioning, or you don't have the requisite leg strength down there, you're then putting all of your other players who share the floor with him in a position where they're trying to get better, but they're trying to get better in an environment that almost isn't fair because a key cog isn't doing, you know, its part. So
are you talking about Robinson or are you talking about Kanter in this?
I'm talking about Robinson now.
Okay, I just checking because I know he has those. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, you know, and that's the thing about Kanter. It's like God knows there's a lot of faults with Enes Kanter, but the basics of basketball, he knows how to do them, and he may not always do them well, but his teammates know he's going to be in the right position at the time he's supposed to be there. With Robinson, I don't, you know, he may get there by the time the season starts, but if the rest of his teammates while he's on the floor aren't going to be able to get better themselves because of the things he's unable to do, then you're not just hurting his development, you're hurting everybody's development. So I'm of the opinion that he may spend a little bit more time in the G League than some people would like. That said, you know, I'd be shocked if by January he wasn't on the roster full time. And I think we're going to see him like on the opening night roster. But would it surprise me if there were a couple of Knicks games where he was not with the team because they wanted to give him a slightly longer stretch in Westchester? No, that wouldn't surprise me.
Well, you know, like you said, we got Kanter, we have Cornette. Potentially, you know, maybe you go small with a Vonleh. I mean, you know, I don't know how much playing time you want to give him, but with the lack of depth on the front lines, I mean, he's going to probably get some good minutes.
And just on Vonleh real quick, I think if Vonleh's going to make it in the league, he's going to make it as a backup five. So I think that's another reason why they may skew towards taking it slow with Robinson, just to see, you know, if they may have found something in Vonleh. Who knows?
That's another thing with Robinson too. Is he a 5 now or a 4? Because both of him and KP are kind of, you know, built like slim, even though they're both shot blockers.
That's a great long-term question.
Like they're not. I don't know if he's even a 5 this season. You know, he's just not. He's not thick enough to me in my eyes. And he can shoot the jumper. It seems like a little bit. I'm not sure how game ready it is. I've seen some film, but is he
lineups that you're going against? And you know, I think the fact that he proves he can be a shot blocker, you're going to want him defensively in a position that he can provide that help right inside. So if you're going against another team that has a 4 that's pulling him out of the paint, then at that point, I want him playing what is, you know, quote, a 5. But, you know, like I said, there's other considerations with it too. So to me, I think that's what's so hard about it now. It's like you have all these lineups out there and different looks. And, you know, I think it was actually just today, I saw as a quote I retweeted out. It was Rod Strickland talking about with Mark Jackson. Because, you know, when, you know, back that was late 80s when they were both coming up as rookies around the same time, rookie, second-year player. And obviously Strickland ended up having to go because you know, you can't have 2 point guards like that on the same team. And Strickland said recently, yeah, that was just how it was back then. But nowadays, like, you just don't look at it the same way. You could, you know, we could have played together. So, you know, I guess that's kind of how I think about it with Mitchell Robinson too, in terms of position at this point.
I mean, listen, if you have 5 7-footers who can shoot and who can switch, you could put them on the floor at the same time in the game today. If they can't, you know, I would encourage Knicks fans to pay a little bit of attention to Indiana this season, because they're at the point where they're
going to be tough.
They're going to be good, and they have 2 7-footers who are arguably 2 of their 2 best players after Oladipo and Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to really try to figure out what they could do with the 2 of them, if they could integrate them into the lineup at the same time. And Sabonis, to me, is a slightly less athletic version of Porzingis. He's obviously not as good. And Turner kind of reminds me a little bit, or Mitchell Robinson, I should say, reminds me a little bit of Turner. So I would be curious to see how they, you know, Nate McMillan's not the most creative guy, the coach of the Pacers, but I'm curious to see how they do trying to work them into the lineup at the same time, because I think that might be the Knicks' future, trying to see, can they get Robinson and Porzingis on the floor? It doesn't have to be 30 minutes a night. We're talking, you know, 10, 12 minutes a game. Can it work? So that I'm looking forward to that.
I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Whenever comes back.
Well, in Sabonis and Miles Turner, I mean, you're talking about, you know, 2 guys who you know, can stretch the floor a little bit and are a bit more versatile big men. And I think that's what Fizdale wants to get a guy like Enes Kanter to be more like. So, and he's got him, you know, hoisting up more threes this offseason. What do you guys think of Kanter kind of stepping outside and stretching the floor a little bit this year? JB, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously it helps when, you know, even giving defenses different looks, right? So if you're going to run, you know, pick and rolls at the top of the key, and now you at least have that option, right? That Kanter might pop out versus always, you know, slowly rolling down. I think that's helps. To me, it's always about, you know, it's no different than football where you just want to give different looks. So you're not always showing the same thing. So even if Kanter's not going to be this like lethal 3-point shooter, the fact that they can mix things up now and force a player, you know, so, you know, if you're running, Trey Burke is running like, you know, 7 or he loves those, you know, that'll get that mid-range jump shot, and he's running 7 or 8 of the same looks, you know, eventually the defender can react to that versus, okay, he's got a, you know, he's getting a different type of screen the way, you know, Kanter's popping off back to the perimeter. So that's what I like about it. And then obviously it can't hurt that, you know, he's another player that can shoot. Or I'll say that can try to shoot. I mean, we've only seen in the workout videos where everything counts. But
right.
Hey, I mean, listen, if he could get that shot to a point where even if he makes a couple buckets a game, and could turn himself into any semblance of a trade piece come February, and they get
that'd be big. That'd be big for us, man.
They get literally anything for him. I would be dancing in the streets. That would be awesome.
That would be excellent. JL, let's get a final point on the 5s.
Yeah, I'm laughing because he's determined to trade my guy Panther. I like you, Kanter. It's all good.
Hey, I like him. Listen, he's gonna recruit. He's gonna, you know.
Yeah. He's gonna recruit. Yeah, I have like a love-hate relationship with Kanter.
He's gonna be out there trolling, recruiting, and all that.
Yeah, he goes really hard. But yeah, I like the fact that Fizdale is encouraging our players to shoot the 3. He did the same thing in Memphis. Gasol kind of fought it, but we're gonna embrace it. I think we're gonna be better for it. Yeah. And like you said, the better we look, even if we keep him or trade him or whatever, the better we look, the more options we get. So I'm all for it. I'm all for being unpredictable. I'm all for moving to the future.
Yep.
True indeed, man. So for those of you watching at home, leave us a comment below or in the chat. Let us know what you think about the Knicks center situation, the Noah situation. Would you like to see them stretch Noah or, some other option? Leave a comment below and let us know what you guys think.